My name is Shelby Woods, and this is my prompt one for our portfolio assignment. The standards and content. The standard I chose to focus on was obtain, evaluate, and communicate information about the physical attributes of rocks and soil. And the substandard, plan and carry out investigations to describe properties such as color, texture, capacity to retain water, and ability to support growth of plants, and of soils and soil types such as sand, clay, and loam. The literacy standard that I chose to connect was Big Idea, research and analysis students use, discuss, analyze, and curate text as they engage in various conversations, activities, and projects about a range of grade level text and topics. And the substandard that was the major focus here was research and inquiry, conduct research to ask and answer questions that clarify, deepen, and extend understanding of a topic of interest using credible sources and communicating relevant and accurate information. The student goals, they were: I can evaluate rocks and soils and communicate their physical attributes. I can plan and execute an investigation that describes the types of soils and their attributes. I can conduct my own research about rocks and soil types. I can identify credible sources and accurate information during my research. The teacher background knowledge. The teacher will first and foremost need to have a deep understanding of the types of rocks and soils and their specific attributes. The teacher will also need to know of good resources for students to use during their research and have it easily accessible for them. It would be useful for the teacher to have higher critical questions for students that need something more rigorous. Also the teacher needs to have prompts and outlines for the students that will need extra assistance. So good sources are easy to link through a platform that we use in my school called Canvas. So I just link it on our homepage. It's a lot like Google Classroom. Differentiation is an attempt to address the variation of learners in the classroom through multiple approaches that modify instruction and curriculum to match the individual needs of students. And I really liked this definition by Renzulli and Tomlinson because I really believe that differentiation is meeting the students where they're at, and that's our job as teachers to meet them where they at and grow where they are at and grow them from there, rather than comparing them to the average or comparing them to everyone else and charting their growth that way compared on other students' knowledge rather than their own. And so I really loved this definition. Pedagogical content knowledge. When a teacher takes their understanding of the content and is able to teach it in a language and using methods that are age appropriate for the students. And how I do that in the classroom. In my room, I make sure that I use vocabulary that students understand and know how to use themselves. I also ask questions and base lessons on their personal interests or relate the lesson to their personal experiences. So, vocabulary is something that I'm fortunate enough to get to use in all content areas. We have a fabulous literacy program that connects all different content areas at one point or another during the school year. And so we are able to use that as an opportunity to introduce the students into a lot of vocabulary across the different subject areas, which is really great. Approach number one that I chose to reflect on is read aloud. A read aloud is when someone orally and vocally reads a text so that students can practice their vocabulary and their comprehension skills. My rationale is that reading to students can improve their fluency, and it helps kids connect to a topic, engages them, and it enhances their comprehension. Some students learn best by listening. Sometimes when I do read alouds, I have students I do ask them questions to keep them engaged, but sometimes if it's a small group read aloud, I have them echo read with me. So I'll read a sentence or I'll read part of a sentence and then they repeat it after me. So it helps with prosody and their overall fluency, their expression, and it's a really good tool to use. Monitoring and managing. To monitor students' learning, I will have predetermined questions and talking points throughout the book. What I do for that is I put sticky notes throughout the book on different pages. When I pre-read it, I find places where it would be easy for me to ask a question or engage the student, and that really works really well. It keeps them engaged, it keeps us on task, and it also allows for critical thinking to happen. And for behavior management, I will reiterate the community rules before we start the lesson. We call our rug the community, and because we come together as a community where we, as a class, listen and learn, we keep our hands to ourselves, we are engaged, and we just don't distract a friend from the learning that is taking place. In evidence of this approach, I did not have a picture of me myself doing a read aloud. I don't have much push and help, and so I just did not have this available. And so I just took one off of the internet to show just how engaging they can actually be. These students are raising their hand. They are attentively listening to the teacher. It looks like she is maybe asking them questions or asking them to connect to the passage. And I do that with my students as well, as I mentioned. And sometimes instead of raising hands, I have my students do like a silent thumb. And that helps students who are maybe not as quick to have a thought or quick to have an answer. It gives them the time to think and to come up with their own, and they don't feel rushed because it's not, everybody's hands are not up in the air waving and distracting them, making them feel pressured to choose something quickly. And so it helps them understand that it's okay if they don't have it right then and there. They're not distracted by everybody else's hands and ideas and all that stuff. It allows them to think. And the second picture is the read aloud that I did in my class, or one of the read alouds I've done in my class. And our media specialist got this for our grade level last year, and it's just a really good book. The second picture is the cover of a book that I read aloud to my class. I read this book to the class to give background knowledge before our inquiry lab and to allow students to generate leading questions for their research. So we did an edible soil inquiry lab, and so I read this book because it goes into the different layers of soil on a very grade. It was a appropriate level for the grade that I teach, which is third grade. And it had good vocabulary that they were familiar with, but could still make them have questions and think just a little bit. My reflection of this approach: by using a read aloud, I am able to build my students' background knowledge and give them an opportunity to connect to the content. The students remain engaged and it generates lots of questions for them. So that was a strength. Something I could improve on is differentiation. To differentiate, I could have read multiple books on different Lexile levels to reach each level of learner just a little bit better. I could have also played a video of the book, reaching a different type of learner. So maybe a read aloud, or someone reading it aloud on the text, but have like the book be animated. Sometimes they have those on YouTube, and some of my kids really enjoy those. So that's something I do sometimes. So that's something I could have done here that I didn't do. For my above level learners, I provided little to no scaffolding on their inquiry activity. I did not give them any guidance on what layer comes next, or what material they should use. For my struggling learner, I chose a read aloud book that was on a lower Lexile level. The vocabulary was easy to understand, and it had text features that they were familiar with, and the questions I asked them were lower level critical thinking questions. So for my above level learners, I could have been better at differentiating that book. Just to kind of reiterate that, I could have had different questions to ask them. I could have split them in small groups and had them answer it as a group. That way, different questions were being asked, but all students were able to hear the answer. That's something I could also improve on. My second approach was the field-based research. Field research is when the students go out and physically take notes and observations on the topic they are researching. They are seeing the research with their own eyes, and they are doing it with their own hands. Field-based research is really good for them to kind of see the real world aspect of what they're learning. And that's kind of my rationale. The experience outside of the classroom allows for students to think critically about, for example, resources and sustainability, power and privilege, and complex societal issues as they surface in real world contexts and interactions. And monitoring and managing. I will observe and take notes on their observations. I will ask guiding questions that spark their thinking and allows them to generate new ideas. I will make sure that students are separated from others that distract them or are a usual behavioral problem. So I just made sure that my students were away from people that they often get distracted with. And here is a picture of them. This is just one of my table groups that I had. This was after they completed their soil lab, and they are very happy. You can tell because they finally get to eat it. And attached is it's sort of the rubric. It's what I based this inquiry lab off of. And you can see in that picture, it has the levels of soil and the order that they were supposed to be in, and the material that was supposed to be used to represent that level of soil or that layer of soil. And while this rubric is not like how I graded them, this rubric is more of how I got my idea to make this an inquiry lab. So it's really supposed to be a just whole group. I tell them, okay, your Oreo is your bedrock. Now put it there and label it with a sticky note. But instead of doing that, I provided them with the material. So I provided them with the Oreos, the shaved coconut, the pudding, and all the materials that were used, and I told them what layer comes first and what item would best represent that layer. So they had to figure out first, okay, I know that bedrock's on the bottom. Now figure out the attributes of bedrock. Which of these materials best represents that? And so it was really cool to see their process and their thinking. And even if they didn't do it exactly as I did or as the rubric said, I had them explain, okay, well, why did you choose or why did you choose the peanut butter chips for subsoil rather than the parent material, or vice versa? A strength on this one was the Edible Soil Lab is a very engaging inquiry lab that appeals to every type of learner. It involves problem solving skills, critical thinking tasks that students must complete independently. Something I could do better next time is I could allow my students to work with a partner. This time they just worked independently. Even though they were in table groups, they were not allowed to help one another. But I do think that if I let them, it would be beneficial for the lower students, and it would strengthen the collaboration skills with both the high and low students. For my above level learners, once these students finished their lab, I had them write just a small piece about the steps they took and how they came to their final product with displaying the layers of soil. And I had them describe the characteristics of each layer. So I made them go a little bit above and beyond. And for my struggling learners, the expectations and guidelines were given to my lower students. I scaffolded the order of materials and allowed them to tell me what layer that material represented. So, for example, I gave them the Oreo and I said, this one goes first. What layer comes first? And here are my references for this prompt.